reconciling land use conflicts facing reindeer herding communities with economic development in the Arctic. And I think that that theme cuts across everything we've heard today, and particularly on this panel. So, Ms. Omma.
Thank you. Are you awake? Been a long day, so hold on. This is the last presentation. And I'll do my best to keep you awake. So I want to start to thank the organizers for me being able to participate here at this very interesting symposium. Today, I've heard the Norwegian Arctic Ambassador Else-Berit Eikeland talking about development in the Arctic and the right to development in the Arctic communities. And it makes me wonder, does this right concern us, the indigenous peoples of the Arctic and our traditional livelihoods? We also heard the Arctic representatives, the Arctic state representatives, talking about a peaceful Arctic with no conflicts, because all natural resources are within national borders. Yes, and we can discuss that. They are within national borders, but on whose territories are these natural resources? And no conflicts. Well, maybe not conflicts that we are aware of here in Brussels or in Stockholm or Oslo or other Arctic state capitals. But I have other experience. I come from Arctic community myself, and we have conflicts. So, as mentioned, my name is Helena Omma, and I'm the vice chair of the Association of World Reindeer Herders. And I come from a Sami reindeer herding family in northern Sweden. I grew up with reindeer. Our family, just as other families, is connected to the animals and their well-being. During wintertime, we live in the forest outside Gällivare, where our reindeer graze. During spring, reindeer migrate to the mountain areas close to the Norwegian border for calving grounds and summer grazing lands, and we follow them. I will, during this short presentation, tell a little about reindeer herding in the world and the challenges that we face, especially due to loss of grazing land. I will then lead you into a specific case, namely the Carlock mining case that is going on right now in Sweden. And Carlock has turned into a symbolic fight for Sami rights, but also it reflects the complications of the mining boom that we experience today in these regions. Then I will discuss the concept of dialogue and coexistence through reindeer herding perspectives. Is dialogue really the way to go to find solutions to the conflicts? And since I know the situation in Sweden best, I use that as an example. But what's going on here is not an isolated case. The situation is similar throughout the Arctic and the reindeer herding world. First, shortly about the Association of World Reindeer Herders. The organization was established in 1993 at the Reindeer Peoples Festival. All reindeer herding regions are represented in this organization. Every fourth year, the World Reindeer Herders Congress is held. This summer, it was in Alagoya in China, in the areas of Evenki reindeer herders. And next Congress will be held in Sweden in 2017. And the Association of World Reindeer Herders are observers in the Arctic Council. This is a map showing reindeer husbandry in the world. And as you see, most of the Eurasian continent is traditional reindeer grazing lands. And we also have some reindeer herding in Canada, Alaska, Scotland, and Greenland that was introduced by Samis last century. And as you can see, reindeer herding involves 24 indigenous groups and about 100,000 people and 2.5 million reindeer. So what is reindeer herding then? The core idea of reindeer herding is to follow the reindeer in their natural migrations between seasonal grazing lands. Reindeer are the ones guiding people's way of life. This understanding is something that all reindeer herding peoples around the world have in common. Through generations, people have relied on reindeer in the Arctic. Reindeer rely on the access to pastures, and in that way the people that rely on reindeer also are highly on pastures. This way of life has worked out through centuries, but now we see the world changing faster than it ever has before. Of course, reindeer herders are able to adapt to changes. That's what we always do. But it is important that our needs are respected in order for us to be able to maintain our traditional lifestyle. Johan Mattisturi, the former chair of World Reindeer Herders, said that the tidal wave must lift all boats, also the small indigenous boats. So what are the main challenges that we are facing today? As you all know, climate change and changed use of the Arctic are the main driving factors of change in these areas. And I believe you're all very familiar with this, so I won't go into details concerning change in the Arctic, but rather look at some of these changes through a herder's point of view. Here you can see some of the impacts that climate change has on reindeer herding. Anyway, most reindeer herders say that climate variability itself is something that they believe they can handle, even if we're now moving into a climate no former generation has any experience of. But climate and changes in nature alone is not something that concerns herders. What concerns herders is the increased human activity in the Arctic in combination with climate change. So this is a global scenario map that shows human activity in the Arctic in year 2000. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this one also. But if the development continues at the same level, in 2030 it will look like this. This means that the reindeer grazing lands will be even more impacted than they are today. The situation is most severe in Scandinavia at the moment, but other regions are not either spared. Development in human activity, such as these pictures show, we're talking about mining, oil and gas extraction, tourism, large-scale forestry, infrastructure projects, and so on. So let's take a look at the Sami area in concerns of mining. This map shows mining resources in Sapmi. And the mining sector is one of several heavy industries within reindeer herding lands, but it is one of the most unsustainable ways of land use, and therefore something that is of great concern for reindeer herders. Where there once has been a mine, the pastures are destroyed for all future. This is, I think, one of Sweden's most well-known mines, LKAB mine, Gironvarre in Kiruna. Without this mine, the town of Kiruna would probably not have existed. Now, as you might have heard of, there is a great process in moving the whole town due to the expanding mine. A story that is not so often told is that the mountain of Gironvarre once was great reindeer pastures. And actually, my own great-grandfather grazed his reindeer on this site. Now it has turned into a mine, and this mountain will never serve as reindeer grazing land again. The Sami villages of Kiruna area have lost great amounts of reindeer pastures. And when the mine expands, more pastures will be lost. And remember that the mine is only one example of development that impacts the reindeer herders here as in other regions. The herders of Kiruna do their best to adapt to the situation today by dialogue with LKAB. But many of them say that this is the only option they have. The mine is there already. They cannot oppose against it, even if their threshold for intrusion in their lands is reached long time ago. Erika Jonsson, reindeer herder from southern Sapmi, Idre Sami village, says that every stakeholder only sees their own project and believes that there are unlimited grazing lands for the Sami villages. The only ones to see the whole picture of intrusion in their lands are the Sami villages. So with this picture of the former reindeer grazing lands of Gironvarre in our minds, let's move into the conflict of Carlock. The Carlock project is quite new, only a few years, but this summer and fall it has escalated when the company Jokkmokk Iron Mines, owned by the British company Beowulf Mining, started to operate in this area. This area is in the middle of Yohkokaska Sami village's reindeer grazing land, and it would cut the reindeer herding district into two, meaning that the reindeer cannot migrate between summer and winter pastures. And the mine also affects the neighboring districts, both north and south of Yohkokaska. The transportation route for the planned mine will impact even other Sami villages far north from the actual mine. And the reindeer herding districts of Yohkokaska and Sirkes have opposed a mine here from the very beginning. They say that they are already impacted by hydropower, infrastructure and forestry, and then a mine is more that they can bear on their lands. So this summer both Samis and other people gathered to the site of Carlock to show their dissatisfaction of the planned mine, but also other projects throughout the country, and also against Swedish mineral policy. And sometimes the protests were quite dramatical when the company used police to remove the opposers from the site. The problem is that in Sweden, Samis have no right to say no to intrusion in their lands. There is no law that protects indigenous land rights in Sweden and that guarantees free, prior and informed consent for the Samis. And this is something that the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination has pointed out in a very recent report, and Sweden is criticized for this. But something that we have in Sweden, though, is a recent ruling that says that short-time mining is of more importance for the country than self-sustained reindeer husbandry. And this ruling comes from the so-called Rönnbäcken case, where Vapsten Sami village has opposed the Rönnbäcken nickel mine, arguing that the Sami village already is heavily impacted by other industries, including mining activities. The case of Rönnbäcken has passed through several instances and had its ruling at a governmental level in September this year. In other words, the Swedish government were the ones to pronounce that mining is more important for the country than traditional reindeer herding. So, with a non-existing protection for indigenous rights and the Rönnbäcken ruling as a background, what solutions are there? The Carlock protests actually have moved things forward for the Sami reindeer herders in Sweden. It reached a point where it was impossible for the Swedish government to ignore the problem that their mining policy is causing. So as a result of the Carlock conflict, the Swedish government recently made an initiative for a process of dialogue between reindeer husbandry and the mining sector. Invited to this process are, amongst others, the Sami Parliament and the Swedish Sami Association, SSR. SSR, though, have declared that they won't participate in this process because they say that it is not the lack of communication that is the core of the problem, but the lack of protection of Sami rights. The Sami Parliament of Sweden has made a statement where they call for a stop of all ongoing mining processes in Sápmi until the rights of free, prior and informed consent are realized for the Sami people in Sweden. The general sayings is that reindeer herding can coexist with other industries, and this is also the governmental attitude. And this might seem like a very good solution, but reindeer herders experience that coexistence always means moving away in favor for other interests. Asla Hantesaara, reindeer herder in northern Norway and with experience of the Melkøya gas project in Hammerfest, he puts it this way. We had no idea about the scale of the industrial development when it started, and nor did people in the town of Hammerfest either. It was impossible to make a picture of it before it began, and we see it all just now, and only now we see what it has meant and what it can come to mean to us. We have to try to adapt to this as long as we can, but to do this also developers, local and national authorities and mainstream society must be willing to contribute. It cannot be right that one side gets the benefits of development while the other only gets the negatives. So to sum up, I want to show you this picture. And it's from a workshop that World Reindeer Herders organized through our youth project, Alien. That is an Arctic Council project that is led by Russia. And on this picture, we have reindeer herding youth from Sweden, Norway, and Finland, who have invited Jokkmokk Iron Mines and representative from the City Council of Jokkmokk for a dialogue. And this was in Jokkmokk in February this year. And as you can see, the youth have made a lavvo, a Sami tent, or at least an imaginary lavvo. And everyone is sitting on the floor. The topic of the lavvo dialogue was the planned mine and the future for young reindeer herders. So dialogue is good, and we need to communicate if we are going to understand each other. But if we are going to use dialogue as a tool for cooperation in concern of land use, it needs to be equal. There is no point to talk about development projects if it's only a one-way communication. Without the right of saying no to development projects, the discussion is unequal and obtuse. And the rate of the pasture loss must also be respected. There aren't unlimited reindeer pastures, and as reindeer herders, we rely on pastures. But I like this picture because it reflects what an equal dialogue is all about. It's about being able to see things through our perspective on the floor at the reindeer skin. Being able to see the problem and challenges through our eyes, trying to find a solution and respecting that if we are going to coexist, it is all about giving and taking. And finally, a quote from one of the young reindeer herders that participated at the Alien workshop in Jokkmokk about the future of reindeer husbandry. We do not wish to close down our indigenous livelihoods. Our goal is to develop our livelihoods at the same level as other stakeholders in society. We do not wish to use all of our time to defend our reindeer pastures. Thank you.